broadcast Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali.
And a very good morning to you. This is Newsline, broadcasting live from the Newsfirst studios in Dawson Street in Colombo. And our guest this morning is from the Lanka Sama Samaja Party, the LSSP. Ministerial portfolios: Minister of Science and Technology, former Minister of Technology and Research, and Senior Minister of Scientific Affairs, and currently a National List MP. The one and only Prof.Tissa Vitharana. Have I got it wrong? You're not a current?
Yes, I'm not a current.
Okay, sorry, my list is wrong.
Booted out.
Oh, you were booted out. You were a National List MP. Professor Tissa Vitharana, thank you very much for being on our program. And let me start by asking you, what is your view on the current government? Are they giving what they promised?
Certainly not. The government was going to establish a better governance, and that has not only not materialized, but I think the level of governance has deteriorated. There is from top to bottom a breakdown in governance. If you see at cabinet level, there is no cabinet unity. There is not only differences of opinion between the two wings of the government, the two main wings, the UNP and the SLFP, but within those parties also the ministers are openly clashing. So that the message given to the country and the world is that there is no united party with a consistent policy. And when you come down the line, you find that there is, for instance, overlapping of ministries, so that there are conflicts with regard to the directives that have been given, and this in its turn goes down the line, so that you find that in the administration in general there is no clear-cut policy. There is ad hoc decision making, and together with that, if you go right down to the level of local government even, as you know, the local government elections are being put off, and without proper rhyme or reason. And in this situation, the voice of the people is not being heard in decision making, even at the level of the local governance.
And Professor, we notice what appears to be an increasing number of protests and so on. What is the real reason behind these protests that we see, that we hear of? Are they politically motivated, or are they really reflective of what the people are feeling?
Definitely reflective of what the people are feeling, because if you study the various protests that are taking place, they extend from professionals, they are like doctors, engineers, various other levels of administration even, right down the line to the trade unions. And you have struggles taking place. For instance, there was a recent problem with regard to the plantation workers that had been every 2 years an agreement has to be reached between the trade unions and the estate management. Now that got delayed for more than a year and a half, and no decisions were taken, so that they went out on strike, and that was a spontaneous movement of the workers right down at that level.
And even yesterday there was a strike with these medical officers.
That's right, yes.
But in terms of these estates, I just wanted to mention that I was looking at some figures. In terms of productivity, the Sri Lankan tea estate worker, his productivity is right down in comparison to Kenya and I looked at it in Kenya.
Okay.
Now Kenya was lagging behind Sri Lanka all those years ago, and then came the nationalization of the estates and so on, and then our production went down the pan. Most of the experts who were managing tea estates moved to Africa, and all of a sudden you found that the Kenyan production was up and Sri Lanka was lagging behind. And when we look at the productivity and the costs per kilo in terms of what has been harvested, Sri Lanka is very expensive. So isn't there a case in this particular instance for our workers to be encouraged to produce more, and then they can get paid more?
Yeah. Certainly, there are really two aspects to this. One is Kenya was fresh volcanic soil, which was very fertile, and the yields were very much higher as a result. Secondly, the expertise went from here, but they developed a system of outgrower farming, where you had smallholders doing the production.
So they went that route, the smallholder route.
Yes. And even in Sri Lanka today, 60% of tea production is smallholder.
Right.
And the smallholders are actually contributing a major section of the tea. The bigger plantations, unfortunately, there is, I would say, mismanagement. There is an undue share of the product being taken over by all sorts of management fees, various other expenses. The directors are making hay while the sun shines. And
in this case, whilst the workers are suffering.
The workers are suffering. So
I went a few weeks ago to a line home near Norelia, and I have to say that I was quite shocked that because in my mind, as we travel around, we can't help but notice that Sri Lankan tea, Ceylon tea, fetches a premium. It's the world's most expensive tea. And then you look at that price selling out there internationally, and then you look at the lot of these people who are living in 12 by 15 line rooms, and it's just not one family but several generations are living together, and there are all sorts of social problems and so on. Somehow there seems to be an unfairness attached to it all.
Definitely. For instance, over the agreement that was going to be reached, the workers demanded just a basic wage of 1,000 rupees. Now, those very workers, what is happening is, they are going out to the villages, they are going to the towns and getting 1,200, 1,500 rupees a day. So why should they stay on this plantation?
Yes, that's a problem brewing, isn't it? But back to this business about corruption. How fair is it, Professor? The people voted for change. In the former conflict areas, the voter turnout was over 80%, one of the highest ever. So those people, they amidst years of frustration and so on, and where their life had been put on hold, and where they lost friends, relatives, children, and so on, they came up and they also voted. And it's appalling, isn't it, that there is so much of nonsense going on now. For example, the central bank. the bond matter, they seem to be treating this with disdain and as if it is a mere headache that can be solved by the price-controlled Panadol now, or paracetamol.
Yeah.
What's your take on it?
No, I think really this government has, shall we say, systematically worked out a strategy to make as much money as possible during the period that they are in power.
Make money for whom, Professor?
For themselves.
For themselves.
And their cronies, crony capitalism, if you can call it that. Because if you look at the bond issue,
Yeah.
it is very clear that never has a central bank governor been appointed by the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister never had any role in this
In that
exercise. Then once he's appointed, you have the bond sales which are being conducted in the most irregular fashion, which has now been exposed fully to the Parliament as well as the country
that's
through
the
court.
problem,
Yeah.
Professor. You used the right words. Exposed fully. How much more exposure is required before any positive, real action is taken?
Well, I would think that if the Prime Minister had any self-respect, he would resign on this issue. He should step aside. There should be a proper inquiry which should be conducted by the President through a competent committee which has not only legal
Punitive powers.
eminence. First, now the evidence is there.
Yeah.
So the people who assess it must be legally competent and at the same time financially competent. And then based on their assessment, if now Arjuna Mahendra himself in his opening comments has said that he acted on the instructions of the Prime Minister.
That's being contested now, isn't it? There are people saying that that's not there.
Well, I don't know the various people who are involved in the reporting.
That's what they say.
Are saying contradictory things. But there doesn't seem to be any doubt that he did make a statement on those lines. And under those circumstances, the fact that, now if you take just one example, the bond issue where in February 2015 was for the sale of 1 billion value bond, and the primary dealers were informed accordingly. Now we find here that once the sale takes place, it is up from 1 billion to 10 or 11 billion.
Yeah.
Yes, and the Bank of Ceylon comes prepared with the requisite amount of money on behalf of the son-in-law's firm.
And company connected to the son-in-law.
Yeah, and now, for instance, anyone knows that a bank, before it sets aside money of that magnitude,
Yeah.
they have their boards, they meet, they take the decisions, all that takes time. So this was pre-prepared. It was
premeditated.
Pre-planned, and the whole exercise was conducted in this shady manner.
But this complete sambal, this Malung, has been in the making since before the election. because come the election results, we had the Ministry of Finance split 3 ways. Never, I don't believe, I believe never done before in the history of post-independent Sri Lanka.
Yes.
Where the ministry, and we have one part given to Ravi K, another part given to Kabir Hashim, and a third part given to a ministry that is under the control of the Prime Minister, the Ministry of Economic Development.
Yes.
So we have the central bank there, and the state enterprises with Mr. Hashim, and I'm not entirely sure what on earth Ravi K is left back with. But the laws and the statutes refer to the minister in charge of the subject of finance, the Minister of Finance.
Yes.
So when he has to give a recommendation as to who should be the governor, for example, there's a problem because the central bank isn't under the Minister of Finance.
Yes, exactly.
So all these are, we could argue the case that these were done with some collateral purpose in mind.
Yeah,
it certainly was premeditated because they didn't just turn up and then decide to split it on the day.
No, certainly not. And now, for instance, it's just the whole thing has been engineered at top level because besides Ranil Wickremesinghe being in charge of the central bank and the whole, shall we say, Arjuna Mahendra appointment, etc., down the line. The Bank of Ceylon comes under Kabir Hashim. You see, so while the Prime Minister is the chief player in the whole act, Kabir Hashim is also part of that act. You see, so that the UNP is involved in that whole process, and thereafter now the 10 billion funds which have been made as a clear profit by
that company,
Perpetual Treasuries, they have already invested in buying a colossal amount of shares in the National Development Bank, in the DFCC, in Central Finance. You see, getting control of the whole sections of our private sector.
Yeah, we those share purchases that professors just mentioned, subject to confirmation and verification. But
no,
yes,
it is appeared in the in the uncle's newspaper, the Sunday Times.
I see.
The front page.
Right. But nephew isn't very happy with the media.
Yes, naturally, because when they come out with the truth.
But should he is the word, I think, should he have a legitimate expectation that the media will bow down, cow down, and paint him in a nice brush because he led this national unity government, and where the media are certainly less intimidated than in the past, right? So, can he have a legitimate expectation of the media turning a blind eye to his activities,
No,
that of his boys, the ministers?
No, you see, the whole concept of Yaha Palne was that you are going to have a more liberal setup in which freedom of expression, freedom of information, all those things are going to be promoted.
But they say that this sort of thing happened, they say, this lot says that the other lot in the previous government did worse in terms of the bonds and so on. That's what they say. What do you say?
No, I don't agree with that. And I think that if you, well, shall I start like this? Every society throughout the world is corrupt.
Okay.
We, of course, as socialists, we say every capitalist society is corrupt.
Okay.
And then in from country to country, the degree of corruption varies from time to time, depending on who is heading the governments, who is in power. And the question is, you have to minimize that. So now here, the defects of the governments have been aggravated as a result of the 1978 Constitution. That Constitution firstly gave executive power to one individual as an executive president. Now that was grafted on to if I can call it a Westminster model parliamentary system.
But in this Westminster model parliamentary system, you don't find David Cameron, Tony Blair, Theresa May, Gladstone, anybody coming to Parliament and saying, oh, I won't be attacking you physically, or bombing your studios, or stoning you, or giving you a present of a stone, which was allegedly thrown at him. And we don't have the Prime Minister of those countries doing these things. And but we have one here who comes and says, oh, I should be attacking with words. What kind of a threat is that? This is a new form of a threat.
It's a threat. Now you know that there is pressure being brought on Vitharana, the media that exposes what the government is doing comes under pressure. So there is, it's not a completely free press situation in the country.
Well, I think the media collectively are not going to bow down to anybody.
I'm glad if they don't.
But they won't. I mean, certainly we won't. We've been bombed, we've been stoned, we've been Claymore bombed, we've been called all sorts of things. But we're still here, and we shall continue to be here because we are the people's channel. So nobody can say whatever. As long as our, as long as there are publishers, as indeed we as a network are lucky and fortunate to have, our publishers obviously committed to the pursuit of this media freedom and so on. I can't agree with you about the other network that you mentioned, but
I just quoted one thing.
yes, but we are here. We're committed to the people's requirements, and as you probably know from our Government program, we've gone around the country. We have discovered what we call at times the forgotten people of Sri Lanka, and we have collected like-minded people and ourselves, and we are actually not talking about it. We are delivering some change.
Yes, I know. That's very creditable. I must congratulate you on that.
Thank you. But the people, there's a vast vat of people there who are frustrated at the utter lack of sympathy or understanding that these politicians have. And we have the Prime Minister who's astonishingly now announced 100,000 rupees a month extra for each of these members of Parliament. What on earth is going on?
Yes, I know. And at the same time, say, you find that the grant that was being given to the elderly has been reduced by 100 rupees. You see, so you find
people acknowledge openly that our network played quite a role in the change that was established in January 2015. That doesn't mean that we stop exposing what's going on in this government too. And exposers are exposers. Accountability is accountability, and responsibility is responsibility. Some people say that the Prime Minister is being unfairly criticized, but I put it to you, Professor, I didn't ask the Prime Minister to come to Parliament and to make a statement that it is he who asked for the change in the system of the way the bonds were being issued. Now, shouldn't, in your mind, Professor, if the Prime Minister made that statement on his own, nobody asked him to make that statement, then shouldn't he explain himself?
Yeah, definitely, because the subject is under his control. He is the minister in charge, and when there is this massive fraud, which is, I think, never in the history of our country have we had a fraud of that magnitude taking place at the central bank, which is supposed to be an autonomous body which regulates the finances of the country in the interest of the country as a whole. And even the monetary board is now coming under
for the benefit
control
of our viewers,
yes.
The central bank is owned by the monetary board.
Yes.
The law that controls all this is called the Monetary Law Act. Under the Monetary Law Act, the monetary board decides and then gives power to the governor of the central bank to go forward and carry out those instructions. The minister can say what he wants or what she wants, but at the end of the day, it is up to the monetary board whether to take on board those things and put in place those things. In this case, Arjuna Mahendran embarked on a solo adventure which turned out to be a misadventure. And the people are being asked to pay for it. Why can't there be a movement to hold Mr. Mahendran fully accountable and for the return on those monies?
Yes, certainly. He firstly, the money has to be recovered. This has to be done by a mechanism which I think Parliament controls, and then in the process of an inquiry and a decision on the nature of the punishment that should follow, the Prime Minister should be out of that scene. He should not he should step aside. And now, for instance, we look at what is happening in South Korea, where the president there has not done anything wrong. The president is being a campaign is going on to get rid of the president on the basis of someone who is in her staff down the line having done a dismissing. So now in that country where the Prime Minister is not directly involved in a matter like that, there is a public outcry which has led to a campaign for the impeachment of the president. Here we are having a situation where this whole affair which is going to involve say future generations as well.
And Professor, we have a situation in this country where, although Mr. Mahendran was not offered a new contract to be the governor of the central bank, we find that the Prime Minister has he's somehow or other, I don't know how, we're not privy to that, but we do know that he accompanies and has accompanied the Prime Minister on various tours abroad, and the talk of the town is that he is attached to the Prime Minister's office.
Apparently.
And on top of in the face of growing economic difficulties, we are almost treated to this absolutely disgraceful statement that the Prime Minister has proposed and that it has been passed to pay the members of Parliament 100,000 rupees more.
Yeah.
It's almost as though the Prime Minister doesn't care about the people.
People, yes, that's right. And of course, I have a graver charge, in fact, where the Prime Minister is concerned, because there is actually no need for us to have to go and borrow $1,500 million over a 3-year period from the IMF. Now, you're probably well aware that people of the caliber of Professor Joseph Stiglitz, Nobel laureate, who was also the chief economic advisor to the World Bank, when the Greek crisis erupted, like us, the debt crisis, he warned them and said, don't go to the IMF. That there are over 50 countries which, as a last resort, have gone to the IMF and ended up in a worse mess. And therefore, don't do it. And now you find, for instance, the VAT rate in Greece has gone up to 25%. The 30% of the staff, permanent staff of the administration has been made redundant because the government can't afford to pay them. So now the Prime Minister is here, the person who is really responsible for the fact that he has this regaining Sri Lanka policy.
Yeah.
And he has said that where the JR started and Premadasa continued, he is going to complete that operation.
We'll have to wait and see. Professor Tissa Vitharana, thank you very much. Actually, we do wish that those pearls of wisdom were also with you in the previous government, and we could have made a different change. But thank you very much for being on our program, and I look forward to welcoming you on our network again.
Right.
Thank you. Have a great day ahead, and take care. God bless.
Okay, thank you.